peaceful, even. Then Grandma Rose passed away. Her death hit me like a freight train. I knew it was coming. She'd been battling heart issues for years, but that didn't make it easier. In the weeks following her funeral, I felt adrift. No more phone calls from Grandma telling me to live a little. No more handwritten notes tucked into birthday cards. It was like losing a piece of myself. Amid the grief, there was the matter of her will. Grandma had been careful with her money, and while she didn't leave a fortune, there was enough to make a difference. The inheritance was split 3 ways. 1/3 to my mom, 1/3 to Claire, and 1/3 to me. I was shocked, grateful, but shocked. Grandma had always encouraged me, but I hadn't expected her to leave me something so substantial. Claire, however, saw it differently. "I just think it's unfair," she complained during the family meeting where the will was read. "I mean, she was my mother too. Don't you think I should get a little more? After all, I was the one who spent so much time with her." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to remind her that her time with Grandma usually involved asking for money or sulking about her latest failure. "It's what Mom wanted," my mom said firmly. For once, she didn't budge. Claire huffed, crossing her arms like a child denied dessert. That should have been the end of it, but of course it wasn't. Claire didn't just let things go. She stewed, she fumed, and then she acted. It started with little jabs, comments about how I didn't really need the money since I had no kids or major expenses. When that didn't work, she escalated, cornering me at a family dinner. "You know, it would really help me out if you just shared some of what Grandma left you," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Claire, I'm sorry, but no," I said, keeping my tone as even as possible. "Grandma wanted us to have equal shares. I'm respecting her wishes." Her face hardened. "Respecting her wishes? You mean hoarding money you don't even need?" I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. Before I could reply, she stormed off, muttering under her breath. I thought she'd let it go after that. I should have known better. The first clue that things were spiraling out of control came in the form of a phone call. "Hey, I heard something weird," my cousin Mara said. Her voice was hesitant, almost embarrassed. "Okay," I replied, setting my coffee mug down. "What kind of weird?" Mara sighed. "Claire's been telling people that, well, that you've been treating her poorly, like emotionally abusive. She said you've been rubbing your inheritance in her face and refusing to help her when she's in need." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My grip tightened on the phone. "She said what?" "She's been going on about how much she's sacrificed for Grandma and how she's struggling now. And apparently, you're enjoying it?" Mara's tone made it clear she didn't believe a word of it, but hearing the accusation aloud was enough to make my stomach churn. "That's a complete lie," I snapped. "I haven't even spoken to her since the last family dinner." "I figured," Mara said quickly, "but, she's pretty convincing. She's posted a lot about it on Facebook." That hit me like a slap. I didn't have a Facebook account anymore, having ditched it a year ago for the sake of my sanity. But Claire, she practically lived on social media. The thought of her airing out lies about me, twisting the story for public consumption, made my blood boil. I thanked Mara for the heads up and hung up, immediately texting a few family members to get more information. Sure enough, Claire had gone full-on dramatic, posting long, tearful updates about how her selfish niece had refused to honor Grandma's legacy and left her in financial ruin. One post read, "I never wanted to say this, but I can't keep it in anymore. I've been emotionally devastated by someone I thought I could trust. Grandma would be heartbroken to know how her money is being hoarded instead of used to help those in need. Family is supposed to stick together, but I guess not everyone sees it that way." The comments were a mix of sympathy and outrage. Aunts, uncles, and even distant cousins chimed in, some condemning me without even knowing my side of the story. "How could she do this to you?" one wrote. "This is disgusting. I thought better of her," said another. It was surreal. It felt like I'd been shoved into the middle of a scandal that didn't exist. and I couldn't wrap my head around how quickly it had escalated. By the time I scrolled through screenshots Mara had sent me, my hands were shaking. Claire had woven a web of lies, painting herself as the victim and me as a greedy monster. She even shared a photo of Grandma's house, writing about how she'd spent countless hours caring for her, conveniently omitting that those visits were more about borrowing money than offering help. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but more than anything, I wanted to understand why. Why was she doing this? What was her endgame? Then I got my answer. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Claire. It was shockingly blunt, even for her. "I've had enough of your games. Either you give me your share of the inheritance, or I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." I stared at the message, bile rising in my throat. It wasn't just a demand, it was blackmail. She was threatening to destroy my reputation unless I handed over everything. Part of me wanted to block her, to pretend this wasn't happening, but another part of me, the part that had worked hard for everything I had, refused to let her win. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard as I debated my next move. After a long moment, I typed back a single word: no. The reply came almost instantly. "You'll regret this." For the first time, I truly believed her. The days that followed were nothing short of exhausting. I wasn't just fighting a battle with Claire. I was fighting to keep my own sanity. Her campaign against me escalated from a few dramatic Facebook posts to a full-blown smear campaign. Every time I thought she couldn't stoop lower, she proved me wrong. It started with phone calls. Family members who I hadn't heard from in months or even years were suddenly reaching out, their voices dripping with concern. "Carly, what's going on between you and Claire?" my Aunt Susan asked during one such call. "What do you mean?" I asked, feigning ignorance, even though I knew exactly what she was referring to. "Well, Claire says you've been difficult. She mentioned how much she helped Grandma and how you're ignoring her struggles now. I just think it's sad, when family can't support each other." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. Claire wasn't just lying, she was rewriting history. If anyone had been difficult, it was her, constantly taking advantage of Grandma's generosity. "I'm not ignoring anyone," I said carefully. "I'm respecting Grandma's wishes. She divided the inheritance equally. That's what she wanted." Susan hummed, her tone non-committal. "I see. Well, I hope you two can work it out. Family should come first." That phrase, "family should come first," became a recurring theme. It was Claire's battle cry, repeated endlessly by people who didn't bother to hear my side of the story. The Facebook posts continued, each more dramatic than the last. One day, she shared a picture of herself sitting by a window, staring forlornly into the distance. The caption read, "Sometimes the people you trust most will hurt you in ways you never imagined, but I believe in karma. The truth always comes out." The comments poured in, a mix of sympathy and outrage directed squarely at me. "You deserve so much better, Claire. Stay strong. People like her always get what's coming." I couldn't even look at the screenshots Mara sent me without my stomach churning. Claire was spinning a narrative where she was the long-suffering victim and I was the heartless villain, and people believed her. But I wasn't going to let her win. The first step was gathering evidence. I went back through every message Claire had ever sent me, combing through texts and emails for anything that would prove her lies. It was tedious work, but it paid off. I found dozens of incriminating messages, demands for money, veiled threats, and plenty of proof that she had no real interest in honoring Grandma's legacy. One email stood out in particular. "Carly, I'm serious. Grandma wouldn't have wanted you to keep all that money for yourself. You don't even need it. Just give it to me, and we can put this behind us." It was exactly what I needed. Proof that her outrage wasn't about family or legacy, it was about greed. I also started reaching out to family members, one by one, to share my side of the story. It wasn't easy. Some were hesitant to believe me, having been taken in by Claire's crocodile tears, but others were more receptive. "I knew something didn't add up," Mara said after I showed her the messages. "Claire's been pulling stunts like this for years. I just didn't realize she'd go this far." With Mara's help, I started piecing together a timeline of Claire's lies and manipulations. We created a folder with screenshots, emails, and even a few old photos of Claire pestering Grandma for money during her so-called visits. It was damning evidence, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to stop her. Claire wasn't the type to back down without a fight. The breaking point came during a family gathering at my parents' house. I hadn't planned on attending. I didn't want to face Claire, but Mara convinced me it was the perfect opportunity to confront her. "She won't expect it," Mara said, "and you have all the proof. She can't keep lying when everyone's looking at the truth." I wasn't so sure, but I agreed. The tension in the room was palpable the moment I walked in. Claire was already there, holding court in the living room, as she regaled the family with yet another tearful tale about my supposed betrayal. Her voice dripped with false sincerity, her eyes glistening with crocodile tears. "And it's not about the money," she was saying as I entered. "It's about respect. Grandma would have wanted us to take care of each other, but Carly doesn't see it that way." All eyes turned to me. "Actually," I said, my voice louder than I intended, "Grandma wanted us to respect her wishes, and her will was very clear." The room fell silent. Claire's face froze, her expression caught somewhere between surprise and anger. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "I'm here to set the record straight," I said, pulling out the folder of evidence, "because I'm done letting you lie about me." I laid the papers on the coffee table and began to explain, pointing out the messages, emails, and screenshots that exposed Claire's manipulations. I showed them the email where she demanded my inheritance and the texts where she threatened to smear my name if I didn't comply. As I spoke, the room shifted. Faces that had been full of judgment and suspicion turned to shock and disbelief. "Claire, is this true?" Aunt Susan asked, her voice trembling. Claire stammered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. "She's twisting everything," she shouted. "This is all fake." "It's not fake," Mara said, stepping forward. "I've seen the messages. I've heard the voicemails. This is who Claire really is." The final blow came when my mom spoke up. "Claire, you've been lying to us," she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "This isn't about Grandma or family. It's about you." Claire's face turned bright red. For a moment, I thought she might argue, but then she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As the dust settled, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The truth was out, but the damage Claire had done would take time to repair. The climax began with a surprising twist. Claire, apparently refusing to let go of her narrative, decided to escalate her campaign by going public. And by public, I mean she made a video. A professionally shot, emotionally charged plea for sympathy. Mara sent me the link one morning. "Have you seen this?" Her message read, followed by a crying, laughing emoji. Curious, I clicked the link, and there was Claire, sitting on a floral armchair in her living room. She was dressed modestly, a box of tissues by her side for effect. Her voice trembled as she recounted her version of events. "I never thought I'd have to do this," she began, dabbing at her dry eyes. "But I've been left with no choice. My niece, Carly, has taken advantage of me in ways I never imagined. I loved her like my own child, and this is how she repays me? By hoarding the inheritance our family worked so hard for and leaving me to struggle?" The video was over 10 minutes of pure fiction, complete with a montage of old photos of her and Grandma, soft piano music playing in the background. She claimed I had bullied her into silence, that I was withholding funds meant to honor Grandma's legacy, and that she was now in dire financial straits because of my selfishness. It was the final straw. Claire wasn't just smearing my name within the family anymore. She was broadcasting her lies to the world. The video had hundreds of comments, many of them strangers offering her support. "This is disgusting! How can someone do this to their own family? one commenter wrote. "Stay strong, Claire. Karma will come for her," another added. I could feel the heat rising in my chest as I read through the thread. Mara's comment stood out, though. It simply said, "Oh, really? Let's see what Grandma would say about this." That's when I decided to take action. I spent hours preparing a response, gathering every piece of evidence I had. The incriminating emails and texts, the screenshots of her earlier Facebook posts, and even the photos of her at Grandma's house asking for loans. Then I made my own video. Sitting in my living room with a calm but firm expression, I addressed the situation head-on. "Hi, everyone. I'm Carly, the so-called selfish niece you've heard so much about. Normally, I wouldn't respond to something like this, but after seeing Claire's recent video, I felt it was necessary to clear the air with facts, not emotions." I laid out the entire story, from the reading of the will to Claire's manipulative texts and threats. I held up printouts of the messages for the camera, reading some of the more damning ones aloud. "Give me your share, or I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are." That's what Claire texted me when I refused to hand over my inheritance. I included clips of the Facebook posts and emails, highlighting how her claims contradicted each other. And finally, I ended with a simple message. I've stayed quiet for too long, hoping this would blow over, but Claire's choice to spread lies publicly leaves me no option but to defend myself. This isn't about family or legacy, it's about greed. I hope this clears up any confusion. I uploaded the video and waited. Within hours, the backlash against Claire was swift and unforgiving. People who had initially supported her started questioning her motives. Some apologized to me publicly in the comments, while others turned on her entirely. "How do you explain those texts, Claire?" "Looks like the real abuser here isn't Carly. I feel so stupid for believing you. Shame on you, Claire." The tide had turned, but I wasn't done. Mara and I had planned one last move, a full family meeting. We gathered everyone at my parents' house, including Claire, who showed up reluctantly, her usual air of superiority replaced by unease. I stood at the front of the room with a laptop connected to the TV, ready to show the evidence to anyone who still had doubts. "This is what really happened," I began, clicking through the slideshow Mara had helped me put together. I showed the incriminating messages and emails, played clips of her public accusations, and contrasted them with photos of her exploiting Grandma's generosity. The room was silent as I spoke. Even Claire's usual defenders couldn't look her in the eye. "Claire," my mom finally said, her voice heavy with disappointment, "how could you do this to your own family?" Claire opened her mouth to respond but faltered, the weight of the evidence too much to deny. I was desperate," she stammered. "You don't understand how hard things have been for me." "No, Claire," I said firmly. "You've been manipulating people for years, and you thought you could do the same to me. But I'm done letting you twist the truth." The meeting ended with Claire storming out, but the damage to her reputation was done. The family finally saw her for who she was. As for me, I felt a sense of vindication I hadn't thought possible. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely, knowing the truth was out and Claire's lies had been exposed. The weeks following the family meeting felt strangely quiet. For so long, my life had been consumed by Claire's manipulations and the fallout from her lies, but now there was an almost eerie calm. The truth was out. The storm had passed. Claire, predictably, went radio silent after her public humiliation. She deleted her video and most of her social media accounts, likely to avoid the flood of comments calling her out. Family members who had once been vocal in their support for her sent me private messages apologizing for doubting me. "I can't believe I fell for her act," Aunt Susan wrote. "I'm so sorry, Carly. You didn't deserve any of this." The apologies were nice, but they didn't erase the months of stress and heartache I'd endured. Still, I accepted them graciously, knowing it was more important to focus on moving forward. Mara became my unofficial PR manager, gleefully updating me on any new developments. "Claire's been quiet, which is probably a first," she said one evening over coffee. "It's like she's finally realized she can't talk her way out of this one." I couldn't help but laugh. Let's hope it stays that way. With the drama behind me, I turned my attention to the inheritance, something I hadn't been able to fully appreciate until now. Grandma Rose had left me a gift, not just financially, but emotionally. Her trust in me had been a source of strength throughout this ordeal, and I wanted to honor her memory in a meaningful way. I decided to use part of the money to make a donation to a local library in Grandma's name. She had loved books, and some of my fondest memories with her were of the two of us sitting together, reading quietly. The library staff were thrilled when I approached them with the idea, and we worked together to set up a small corner dedicated to Grandma, complete with a plaque that read, "In loving memory of Rose Williams, a lifelong lover of stories." Seeing the plaque installed was a bittersweet moment. I missed her fiercely, but I knew she would have been proud of me for staying true to myself. As for the rest of the money, I chose to be cautious. I met with a financial advisor and set up a plan to invest most of it, ensuring that it would provide security for years to come. It wasn't flashy, but it felt right, like something Grandma would have done. My relationships with the rest of the family slowly began to heal. While some wounds couldn't be erased overnight, the shared understanding of what Claire had done helped mend many rifts. My parents, in particular, became more vocal in their support of me, something I hadn't realized I'd needed until now. "I'm proud of you, Carly," my dad said one evening, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "You handled yourself with so much strength. I know your grandmother would be too." Hearing those words was like a balm to my soul. As for Claire, she became a ghost. She moved out of town shortly after the family meeting, leaving behind nothing but whispers and speculation. No one knew where she went, and to be honest, I didn't care. I wasn't interested in keeping tabs on someone who had brought so much negativity into my life. Instead, I focused on the people who mattered, the friends and family who had stuck by me, even when things got messy. Mara and I grew closer than ever, our bond strengthened by the ordeal. We often joked that we should write a book about the drama, though neither of us would ever actually follow through. Life slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. I threw myself into work, took up yoga to de-stress, and even started dating again. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at peace. One evening, as I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and one of Grandma's favorite books, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The anger, the hurt, the triumph, it all felt like a distant memory now. What stayed with me most wasn't the drama or the conflict, but the lesson I'd learned. I was stronger than I'd ever realized. Claire's lies might have shaken me, but they didn't break me. I'd stood my ground, defended the truth, and come out the other side with my integrity and my inheritance intact. I smiled, turning the page of the book. Grandma would have been proud. 2 years later, life had taken on a rhythm I loved. My career was flourishing, thanks in part to the stability the inheritance had provided. The library corner dedicated to Grandma Rose had become a small local landmark, and I often stopped by to see kids curled up in the beanbags, lost in books she would have adored. Claire was still a distant memory, her name rarely mentioned at family gatherings. When it did come up, it was always with a sense of pity, not malice. She'd lost more than just credibility, she'd lost the trust of everyone around her. As for me, I'd gained something invaluable, a deep sense of self-worth. The chaos had taught me to set boundaries and value the relationships that nurtured me. Sitting on my porch one evening, watching the sunset, I realized how far I'd come. Grandma had left me more than money, she'd left me the tools to build a life I could be proud of. And that's exactly what I was doing.